Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the July meeting of the Juvenile Detention Board of Managers for Delaware County. I'd like to make note that we have Councilwoman Elaine Schaefer, who's joining us remotely. Councilwoman Schaefer? Here she is. And I also want to note that the controller, Joanne Phillips, has asked for a designee to replace her on the board. And so Kelly Diaz from the Controller's Office is here with us today. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank
you. With that, I think we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item for business today is the first round of public comments, and I'd like to remind the public that this first round is only for items that are specifically on the agenda for today. And if you'd like to address the board, please come to the podium. Keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and at the outset, please give your name and address. Are there any public comments? Hearing none. The next item for business is an approval of the minutes from last month's meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments on the minutes from last month? Yes.
Just that I will be abstaining from this vote since I was not at that meeting. Thank you.
Understood. Thanks, Ms. Diaz. Without anything further, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And an abstention from Ms. Diaz? All right. Thank you. The motion passes. Reports for the month. We'll start with the report from the Juvenile Court and Probation Services with regard to monthly detained.
Kirsten Fitzsimmons, I'm the Resource Supervisor for Delaware County Juvenile Probation. We currently have 4 youth in detention at the moment. We have 2 males at Bucks County, and then we have 2 youth who are at Morgantown who are both direct files, 1 female and 1 male. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pending direct files in various locations, whether it be jail, AWOL, or Philadelphia. Any questions?
Questions for the board? All right.
Thank you.
Next is a report from our Superintendent for Juvenile Justice Services, Mr. Rosari. David.
Thank you, Board. Good evening. Since we last met on the 21st of June, I did want to update a pretty major point of an event. So I was informed by the Attorney General that our building was released in terms of investigation. The exact wording that was sent to me was, we are completely done with the physical building, and we may now begin cleaning without any special accommodations. I say that to segue into understanding that prior to the 27th of June, there was very limited things that can be done at the Pryor Center. You know, when you hear our group talk about things that were out of our control, we were talking specifically about the building, the investigation of it, and that it was now released. Just want to publicly state that, and that I was notified on the 27th of June. So moving forward, what's needed from us? Again, we have to organize with our facilities department and pick up over 200 boxes in Harrisburg and have those stored at our facility. I'm currently working with procurement around getting an RFP out around the digitalization of those files and storage. As you may or may not know, any young person who resided in the building for the last 5 years, those files have to remain. Any other additional files we have to digitize and find storage, hopefully in the county archiving. And again, we're going to work directly with Public Works around cleaning the building and renovating as well. So before I segue into our Director of Public Works, who's here, is going to give us an update on that. Does anybody on our board have any specific questions around the announcement that I made?
So just to clarify, what you're saying is that the Attorney General's investigation isn't complete in total. There's no kind of findings or report out, but the buildings aspect to it, that is complete, and therefore the county has now access back to do whatever they need to with regard to use of the facility or renovation or whatever that may be.
That is correct. The physical site, the investigation of the physical site is now complete, not the total criminal investigation, just the physical site.
Thank you.
This is Shakima Townsend. Not sure if you can hear me. Does this have any impact on our timeline in terms of the license process? I know we spent a lot of time in the last meeting talking about that, and I just want to state that clearly if it does or does not.
Yeah, to be clear, it's not going to affect us being able to submit an application. And I don't know if either our solicitors who are on have any additional comments. I'll just leave it at that point.
Any comments from the solicitors? Doesn't sound like there are.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, David is correct. It will not, the current investigation does not have any direct bearing on the application. Certainly the circumstances will be relevant background in the state's evaluation of that application, but it does not prevent the county from applying and moving forward with the process.
And my understanding is that there has been some discussion with the state with regard to proceeding with an application for license on a conditional basis that what work may need to be done to the facility, that can happen in a dual track manner, that we don't need to have all the renovation complete before we start the process of licensing, but rather we can sort of dual track the licensing process along with the necessary work. Is that a fair statement? That's
accurate. So we can submit with our application plans to renovate, and it's not going to affect the submission of the application.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the board with regard to the update from the Attorney General? Okay, continue, please. So the next update we want to give in terms of our Director of Public Works, she's going to give us an update just in terms of where we are with an architect. So I brought Danielle Floyd.
Good afternoon. I'm Danielle Floyd, Director of Public Works for the county. Wanted to provide you with an update from the last time I provided an update with regards to working with Superintendent Irizarry on having architectural support services with regards to the JDC. This morning, we presented a revised proposal with Spiesel Architects, who we are recommending work alongside Superintendent Irizarry and his team to do two things. One is to develop a program of requirements related to not only the secure detention requirements, but also all of the programming and reentry information or recommendations that came from the subcommittee that we're working together on. So we believe that it's important to make sure that we can be clear in terms of the square footage required for the number of staff who need to be accommodated, as well as to define what are those particular areas that are going to be required. And so that engagement, that portion of the proposal did not change. What did change, however, is that we had previously presented to the board that we were going to look at multiple scenarios with regards to repurposing and reuse of the existing facility, but also potentially explore other locations. We are coming back and recommending that we exclusively focus our attention on the Lima campus, and I want to be very clear to say campus, which will be inclusive of not only developing that program of requirements, but also being able to explore both either reuse of the existing facility and how that aligns with the program that Superintendent Irizarry is going to be putting together, or additional options that may consider maybe a demolition of some of the existing facility and some selective new construction. The deliverable is to be able to provide those clearly defined program of requirements, the required square footage that aligns with the licensure requirements, as well as, I think we said a minimum of 20 beds is what we've discussed, and along with a opinion of cost to bring back to the board as well as to council to receive direction on how we should move forward. So that is revised from the last time we talked, where we were considering other locations that our focus will now be exclusively at Lima. And it was important that we came back to make sure that this board was aware of that revision. And happy to answer any questions that you may have for myself or for Superintendent Irizarry.
Thank you, Ms. Floyd. Questions or comments from the board?
So I just want to add a comment. Within that proposal, I mean, two key components that we highlighted was we wanted to make sure it was a dual-purpose facility, right?
Yes.
It wasn't just for managing young people who are in detention. It was about servicing young people proactively. And we wanted to make sure built in with that cost proposal would be making sure it reflects best practices in trauma-informed care, and even bringing in a trauma-informed specialist to advise our architect on the space and how it can be reimagined.
Questions, comments from the board?
I have a question from the
Schaefer.
Zoom world. Can we hear a little bit about how we landed on 20 beds being the goal to design for?
Thank you, Councilwoman. So as we reviewed the data, and particularly young people who commit very serious crimes here in the county, and we talked about in our last meeting, we average around 23 a year. Understanding that their average length of stay can vary anywhere from 3 months to a year if they're going to be on trial during that time, we wanted to make sure that we had enough beds to account for those young people. Also, we've been averaging around 7 per week in this county. Informally, as I work.
Can you clarify that? So 7
young people who are in detention.
at any one time?
At any one time.
Okay, not 7 new
Yeah.
detentions, but.
Yes, average weekly census of 7 young people, 50% of those being direct files, so anywhere between 3 and 4. And then working directly with our chief of probation and understanding that there are times that up to 5 young people are being turned away at once. That's accommodating for 12 as it is. And with the way our current facility is built, you have a pod of 12 young people. You need a separate in terms of gender or whatever gender they identify with. For us, having 2 different pods, male, female, 10 to 12 each is the most doable number, if that makes any sense. So in terms of the average yearly data, it supports young people who are most violent here in the county and arrested, and we want to be able to accommodate for that.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that as you presented to the board, I think it was last month, in terms of numbers over the past 10 years, there has been a very consistent decline year over year in what the demands have been. It's down roughly 90% from where the demand was 10 years ago. And that really hasn't abated in terms of dropping. The only thing that sort of created an uptick was the new rules around direct files at the beginning of the year, which created a bit of an uptick. But that's reflected in the numbers that you just presented.
And Councilwoman Schaefer, we took a very close look at years, specifically 18 and 19 prior to COVID, and those numbers scaled around close to 20 young people. But we want to accommodate for potential upticks.
And I think it's also worth pointing out kind of the underlying reasons for the decline is that there is a general trend toward finding non-detention solutions for youth. There are obviously always going to be certain youth who need to be in a secure environment for the protection of the community and for themselves, but that number is dropping. It's dropping year over year, despite sometimes the narrative that we hear in the world. The numbers are the numbers. And so I think that's been a cause that I've heard consistently across the board members here, that we want to continue to lean into finding alternatives to detention where that's possible to allow for the right combination of security and also, services that are more in community and aren't putting a youth at an early age into a mindset of being jailed before they go into adulthood.
Let me just echo what you said, Chairperson. I think if Director DiMatteo were here, and we might want to have her here, to have a report on exactly what her office does with youth who have charges so that they don't end up in detention. Because I think the perception of the public is, the youth commits a crime, send them to detention. Well, oftentimes when the youth gets in trouble, detention is the last thing that our juvenile probation office wants to do. So I think it would be good to hear from her, just so the board and the public is aware of everything that they do to make sure that these children, these youth, are not kept in detention. And when it has to be, it's kind of a last resort. It's for protection of the public, and oftentimes for protection of that particular youth because of their particular behaviors or because of some self-harm or some other issues that are often related to not just crime, but often to family issues as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something we want to continue to improve upon, but certainly. Any other questions or comments from the board members?
I just have one
Schaefer.
more follow-up question, and that is there a difference in the housing that would be provided for the direct file and then for just the non-direct files? Or do you separate them at all? Is there any kind of special compensation for the direct files? Or is it all one category?
So again, I think with the number landing on 20, right, that gives us space to have separation if needed, right? And it doesn't have to be direct file, it doesn't have to be traditional detention. If there's a young person who's going through a crisis and may be affecting the entire group, you want to have space for him or her to be able to deal with their crisis, get the help from staff. And I think that's going to play a major part in making sure we have space to spread kids around, obviously responsibly making sure we have adults that care for them. So I don't want to put it on direct file, traditional young people, but we do want space for a young person who's going through a tough time to be able to get the space he or she needs.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts, questions from board members for Ms. Floyd or Mr. Rosari? All right. Mr. Rosari, anything else on your side before we move on to old business and new business?
Nothing else on mine.
Okay. Any old business from board members?
Hi. And in the absence of, I've missed a few due to vacation and other reasons, and I've caught up with some minutes, but just a question, or if you can give me a status on kind of HR aspect of the support for you. The last time I was here, I heard you loud and clear of needing or wanting and desiring some support. It sounds like there's some movement as the building, as we're talking about the building, so how about for you?
No, yeah, first and foremost, board member, I do appreciate so we do have 2 new directors that are part of my staff. They are behind me.
Oh.
And we've been working day in and day out trying to get things done.
Great, okay.
We were approved for one more position, yeah, some administrative support, and I think hopefully in the next month or 2, he or she will be onboarding, and so we are moving in the right way in terms of help. I appreciate that.
Thanks, I'm just catching up. Thank you. Oh, good for you.
Any other old business? Any new business from the board? Hearing none, I think we can move on to the next round of public comments, which can be more widely ranging within the area of detention in Delaware County for juveniles. So if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak, please come to the podium. And again, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less and start with your name and your address.
Okay, peace everybody. My name is Andre Sims, address 708 Felton Avenue, Sharon Hill, PA. Originally from Chester, Pennsylvania. The lead youth organizer for the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project. These are my comrades you see here in the building. We're a youth-led organization, part of the Care Not Control Coalition, who are also present. And today, I'm here to speak to what I would call a need to shift this narrative. We don't need to put kids in cages. We don't need a new facility. What we need is to take the $200,000 on average that we spend to lock a kid up and use that and give the kid resources. We spend over $200,000 actually to incarcerate children compared to the close to 16,000 we spend to educate them. And the narrative is that we need this new facility. And excuse me, but it blows my mind a little bit that, sorry, I'm getting emotional because I was in Lama. I understand what went on there. And we're talking about reopening it, and the investigation isn't even done. And then y'all sit here and say, oh no, it's a campus this time. The investigation isn't even done yet. Like we haven't even found out the entirety of the horrors that went on in there, and we're still planning to go full speed ahead with putting kids back in this facility. And it saddens me that we're focusing so much of our energy on reacting when we could take our resources and our abilities and focus on what we really need as young people, what we really need to give young people in the community. Because if we continue to react, we continue to create the same problem, you know. And if we want to pad people's pockets and create jobs, that's one thing. But if we really want to solve this problem in our community, which I hope that we're all here to do, because we all want public safety, we all want safe communities. So that means education. That means programs, that means resources. That doesn't mean putting kids in cages. And I think when we're having these conversations about the solutions and, you know, how to address the problem with crime in the community, we need to be talking with directly impacted young people. We need to be talking with people who've been in these facilities. We need to be hearing solutions from people who were once part of the problem who are now working to fix their community. And so I hope that you will hear me out. I hope that you will hear, you know, the other young people that came, my comrades out, and, you know, keep an open mind today, because the last thing we need to do is spend so much money on another facility on putting kids in jail. We need care, not control. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. And what I'd say in response, and I don't know if other board members would like to comment, but I think there's great sensitivity from this board about the concerns that you addressed. And that's why I think we talked about earlier, and we do every month, about how the idea of what detention looks like under this board, I think, is different from what was in the past. And I think it's important to point out that the Lima facility was not run under the direction of this board. This board did not exist. And a building and those managing, operating, and overseeing it are separate and distinct. The Lima facility will not be opened in its prior look and design. There will be substantial changes to it. And I think you talked about putting kids in a cage. That is exactly not what we want a facility in Delaware County to look like. This is not adult prison. So, you know, I really do appreciate your advocacy for the community that's affected. We need to balance the importance of reimagining what detention looks like in this county versus what it used to, but also understanding that there are, and not as many as there was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but there's still remain a certain number of youth who, for their own safety and for the safety of the community, need to be put in a secure facility. And when I say secure facility, I don't mean kids in cages. I mean a facility where they're not able to freely leave. And you know, when we have monthly stories about children cutting ankle bracelets and being at large, we have stories of youth that are, you know, AWOL from facilities outside this county. We can't ignore that. So I really do appreciate the sensitivity of this issue. I think we all do. I know we all do. And I hope that there can be some perspective from the community that a building isn't the management of that building. And that I hope there's some openness to reimagining what Lima looks like after renovation and under new supervision. But I do appreciate your coming in. I don't know if anyone else would like to respond.
I guess my feedback Councilman Madden spoke about the physical look of the building. I'll be steering the ship in terms of the culture of the building, right? In terms of the staff, in terms of the way we treat children, the way we look at children, particularly children that look like me and come from the same communities I come from. I can't speak for any staff member who worked there prior to, but I can speak for myself. I can speak for the staff that I've hired thus far. We truly do care about kids. We truly do care about kids that look like us. In my prior life in the city of Philadelphia, focusing specifically on gun violence, I saw a lot of young people who looked like me, who came from the same neighborhoods I came from, lose their lives, right? And when I looked at the trajectory of their lives, I seen the transition from child welfare to juvenile justice to the adult system to being shot and killed or being a perpetrator. I'm here to really try to end that cycle, understanding that this board and myself is not going to have any control over who's put in the facility to an extent, but we do have total control of how we treat kids when they're there. I'm committed to this county in terms of young people, and any young person who's in the facility that I'm running is going to be treated fair, and is going to be rehabilitated and give the services they need in order to move forward.
And the last thing I'd say on that is we're also committed to making this an open conversation. As we move forward with the facility, as we get closer to an opening, I encourage the members of the public that are most engaged in this issue to, join in the conversation. And I think, I don't want to speak for the board, but I'd welcome an open house of sorts for people to visit it before it's opened and to have the opportunity to provide comments. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Jared Cooper. I'm a certified peer specialist and community health worker, along with being a youth organizer for Youth Art Self-Empowerment Project. I want to thank you for your sensitivity and your comments that you've made. What resonated me was one of the things he said, what was your name again? Dave. About trauma-informed care. And one thing that I had learned and was educated in is trauma-informed care and working with youth and intervention. And from my experience, one of the worst things possible in humanity is taking somebody's freedom away and not having the free will to be able to do what you please, to be able to go out in the world, to be able to learn from your mistakes, to be able to educate yourself with the resources that are in the world today. So basically, I feel like we need to connect youth to resources instead of throwing them away. You can't throw a human away, put them in a box, put them in a cage, and expect them to learn from their mistakes. You can't put somebody in a position where they are not being assisted with their mental health. I feel like it's not full circle a crime issue, it's a mental health issue. And worldwide, mental health is a problem that causes people depression, anxiety, stress, all types of things. And you realize that, and if it's not treated, it will lead people to make decisions that they don't think about. And those decisions that they don't think about will lead them to something that is called crime in our society. And it's not always crime. How are we going to take care of people? How are we going to treat people if you label them a criminal? And race falls into it as well. And you see a young black man who commits a crime and he's incarcerated, but a young white man gets the resources easily, way easier than a young black man. And that's not fair in our society. I feel like everybody should have the same opportunities. Everybody should have the same resources. Everybody should be able to be treated equally. I've been impacted by the criminal justice system. I went to jail and I came out, and I'm prime example that I'm up here and able to speak on my own behalf and be able to tell you that this is what support looks like. My comrades beside me supported me to be able to come here, to be able to educate myself, to be able to come up here and speak from my experience. And I'm able to speak and tell you that change is possible. And if we come together as a community, we can do that. We can create positive change. We can help heal our communities instead of throwing people away. Because I don't think that's the option. I feel like jails, putting people in cages, anything like that is inhumane. And we're all humans here. That's all I got to say. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from the public?
Hi, Mary Austin, 1036 First Avenue, Media PA 19063. I may have missed it, but my concern is for the juveniles who are at George W. Hill. And I know the last time when I watched the last meeting, there was some information that you were still trying to get from George W. Hill about who's there, why they're there, how long have they been there. I actually toured the facility myself, and it looked like they were all in kind of solitary confinement. So I just wanted to see if there was an update on any of the demographics.
At this time, I don't have any specific demographics for the young people up at George Hill. Again, any young person who committed an adult offense after December 21st would have been placed in juvenile facility. These young people must have been prior. And again, I can, we can connect offline, and I can see if I can provide any additional information if I contact a public defender or a district attorney. But at this point, I don't have any specifics.
I would add, I think, and please, Mr. Resnick, if you want to correct me, I believe that youth who are at George W. Hill are youth who have already been adjudicated. If they're pre-adjudication, that's where they're staying in a youth facility following December. But after they've been adjudicated, if they've been deemed by a judge to be sentenced as an adult, that's where they would be at George W. Hill. And again, there may be others who can correct me on that, but I think that's right. I also want to clarify, I'm not aware of any youth
So we're
that
not
are
sure about that. You're
well,
guessing.
I have several experts in the room who are nodding in approval of what I'm saying. So I think I'm right about that. Mr. Resnick, do you?
I'm Mike Resnick. I'm the Criminal Justice Program Manager, I guess, reporting to County Council. And as Mr. Irizarry mentioned, there was a deadline when the law changed. So people who were arrested and certified prior to that are housed at George W. Hill. I will tell you that I was there probably 3 weeks ago on a tour. They're not held in solitary confinement. They're held on a unit for juveniles. By law, they need to be separated by sight and sound from the adults, so they can't be seen by or have physical contact or be in proximity to the adults. They're on their own unit. They have school services there. They're out for recreation. They were out for recreation when I was there. So I just want to absolve you of the notion that they're held in solitary confinement. They just need to be
They're in by themselves. They're in a
well,
cell
they're
by
by themselves. They're not in contact with adult offenders or adult pretrial
Right.
detainees. So correct, they're by themselves.
Right.
But the unit that
Just
they are
solitary.
on, they're out. Okay, we can, I guess, argue about the semantics, but they're housed in a housing unit where they don't have contact, sight, or sound of adult offenders. They do have recreation. They're out for rec, and they do have educational services.
Yeah, again, they are not in solitary. Solitary confinement means they're
In their
celled
cell, 20
individually, and they have no interaction, absent a very minimal amount per day, with each other. That's not the case here. Youth are separate from adults, but they have regular recreation time amongst youth, separate from adults, and that's required by law.
My name's Amara Coles. I work for the Juvenile Law Center. My address is 1815 North Edding Street. And basically, I just wanted to talk about the alternatives because, one, y'all can stay up here and create these programs, these facilities for these kids, but y'all don't actually sit down, like far as you saying the adult prison, the children are separated from the adults. I was a youth, charged as an adult. I had adults knocking on my cell. I walked the hallways to go to classroom. Adults are walking past me. Just because there's a guard that say y'all have to stand on the wall doesn't mean that there's a person that has mental health in an adult facility can't attack me. So they do have access to the youth. So I want to correct you on that one. Two, they do have an art program. They did have a math class, a Spanish class. There was no reading. There was no history class. There was no like exercising as far as like gym, no music. All, when you say education, you want to do overall, not just no 2 classes, reading and math, and call it a day. And 3, what none of y'all sitting up here know is incarceration credits are not transferred to public schools. So I can do 6 months in, let's say, the juvenile center. I go back to, like, say, Ben Franklin. Those credits don't matter here. I went to Ben Franklin. My credits did not go over there. I had to take 2 classes for 10th and 11th grade. They made me take more classes than I had to, so I really didn't have a lunch break in order for me not to get left back. So I was doing 2 grades in one so that I couldn't get left back at all. Y'all can do way more. If y'all had a mentor, programs, we have to, as a parent, and I'm a mother myself, and to get a job nowadays is hard to find one that's going to pay you over $18 an hour because you have to have education. Who's going to have $500 to pay for a child to go do music classes or do sports or, you know, do a drawing class somewhere? Even after school programs for, like, if my child is behind in reading or math, you have to pay for everything. So if y'all can barely offer these things in a incarceration prison, how are y'all going to sit there and reopen up a prison again, and y'all can't even give these kids the daily needs they even need? Mental health, you have to send a note to the therapist to speak to them, which none of y'all know that it takes up to a week to even get the therapist to even look at it. Look at it as high school. We got over 60 kids in the high school building. You, the director, you telling me that you're able to sit down in one day and speak to over 20 kids that has an issue with a staff member, somebody touching them, somebody hitting them, somebody feeling like their needs aren't being met. And a child is supposed to get care. If they're saying that they have homelessness issues or they're having credit issues, besides y'all saying, oh, get emancipated, because y'all do preach that a lot in those facilities. I've been in more than one of them, so I know. Transfer from the RCF all the way down to the juvenile one as well. And I did go to the little detention area before as well. Everything that y'all saying up here, if y'all couldn't do it then, y'all can't do it now. So if y'all can at least try to give into a community base for these children and resources, or even have people like y'all, let's say if I want to be a lawyer.
Ma'am, if you could wrap up your comments, we're past 3 minutes.
I got you. Even if I was a youth and I'm getting out of incarceration or something like that, even a call to make sure these kids is okay if they got everything that they need. Y'all don't do none of that stuff. So, again.
Thank you, ma'am.
We want to be careful, not controlled.
Good evening. My name is Dana Lomax Ayler. My address is 1010 Sunset Street in Trainer, PA. I am a mother. I'm a wife. I am a formerly impacted woman. I'm also the president of CABIDELCO, which stands for Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration. And what we do is we challenge the injustices in the judicial, the penal, and the prison system. I listen here very patiently, and I heard a couple things. One of the things I heard you, sir, forgive me, I'm not good with names, perfect with faces. I heard you say we have to change our imagination of how alignment is. That will never happen. Never. It's not going to happen. It's been too much traumatic memory that will always be what it is. So that isn't going to happen. I also heard you say there will be a detention space and a space that's, if you will, an honorary space. That isn't going to happen. One thing you can't do is change a guard's, a CO's mindset. If he's going to be like that with the detainees, if you will, at-risk youth risk, he's going to be that same way with those who aren't as difficult, if you will, or at risk. Nobody discussed alternatives. I promise you, your narrative and your thinking would change if we went back to how it was when I was older, no, younger, right? It takes a village. If it was your child, 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 if these were your children, I promise you, your mindset would be different. Because it isn't, throw them away. That's what everyone sat here and said that I heard speak. I heard no one talk about alternatives. I heard our youth pour their heart out, pour their guts out. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And sir, Nothing has changed. Nothing is changed. Nothing is going to change. He already said he has no control over who's hired.
Prior staff.
He said he has no control over who goes into Lima and is hired to care for these at-risk children, that nobody is taking the initiative to come up with the alternative to incarceration. No alternatives. Everything is incarcerate cage. And sir, it's solitary confinement. That's what that's called. One, solitary, confined in the box. Imagine this, and I'm going to sit down because I know my time is up and I'm going to be very respectful. Imagine being in a bathroom. In my den, I have a bathroom. It's about 8 by 10, let's say. Imagine everything that you cherished and belonged to you was in that room with you, with a toilet, a steel toilet, okay, and a steel bed. Your perception would be different. Thank you.
If possible, I want to address kind of the last two speakers, and for me, I accept the challenge of saying things can't be different, right? Hold me to that standard. If we're saying these are the things, these are the ways things have always been, and this guy can't make a difference here, I accept that challenge. Internally, I would never accept that. I came here to make a difference. If you're saying that our staff, we can't hire staff that care about kids, well, I accept that challenge. And I'll be the face and responsibility of that challenge as well. So please hold me accountable. I respect and appreciate your perspectives. There were some things said in terms of I have no control of who's hired. That is not true. I handpicked my first 2 director hires. I had no control over what happened, what staff allegedly did prior to. And, I'm not going to worry about the past. I'm going to worry about moving forward. In terms of young people not being able to graduate, my director behind me graduated several young people in the city of Philadelphia at the center. They earned their credits. These are all initiatives we're going to bring to Delaware County. We're going to continue to do so. And again, I can show you better. I can tell you in terms of when we have a facility and when we have young people there, how we're going to care about.
Yeah, and I'll also add, there was a comment about there not being any conversations about alternatives to detention, but I would encourage you to watch previous meetings. We may not have spoken a lot about alternatives today, but there's been arguably more discussion about alternatives to detention as there has been about detention over the past year's worth of meetings. So please look back at the meeting notes. We spent a lot of time talking about alternatives. This is something that we are very focused on because I think there is uniform agreement about the fact that detention is a last resort. It's not the default response to challenges with youth behavior. It's really a last resort. And I understand there's a lot of pessimism and negativity about what is possible and what would happen in Delaware County because of the past. But please give Mr. Arizari a chance. Please give this board a chance. We have never overseen the prior Lima facility. That was under the courts. It shouldn't have been. It was. It's no longer the case. So please give us a chance.
Thanks. I just want to make a comment to some things that I heard. I appreciate all of you showing up. It's really nice to see the community here, and I look forward to, as a board member, to also see all of you be part of what can be a solution, not just tonight, but moving forward, and to help our superintendent and the other providers that are doing their due diligence to bring in care, resources, alternative programming to our community. When we talk about the community and keeping children, which are the juveniles that we're speaking of, and protection of the community, we also want to make sure that we're including victims of crime. I heard about free will and some things that have been taken away from juveniles that are in the care of detention. You're absolutely right. However, there's free will and many things taken away from victims of crime too. So we're having the conversation. We need to include all individuals, because a 3-year-old that's being sexually abused by a 17-year-old also has the right to be cared for as well. I would encourage you to, as our chair suggested, is to look back. For the last year, I've been honored to be part of this board, and more conversation has been on the alternative than the actual site and the detention. And our role is actually the the proper terminology of the board is the Delaware County Juvenile Detention Board of Managers, and we have spent significant time in meetings and outside in other meetings vetting providers from Philadelphia County and other counties to make Delaware County look differently. And so I encourage all of you who have voices tonight to continue to support all of us and the providers that are working day in and day out, including law enforcement and juvenile probation. So thank you for being here and your comments, but it's been a very long year and we've gotten a lot accomplished, including hiring a superintendent that comes from such an impressive background in juvenile detention and rehabilitation.
Thank you, Ms. Lehan.
How y'all doing? My name is Joshua Glenn. I am the co-founder of the Youth Art Self-Empowerment Project. I'm also the coordinator of our Youth Participatory Defense Hubs that we do every week for young people that are fighting cases. Anything you do for us without us is against us. And so if the young people in the communities that are really impacted by this issue isn't at the table, you're not going to come up with the right solutions. And so we need to be here. You know, it's not a magic trick. We can't do a magic trick and change and solve these issues. We all have to do this as a community. And so just to tell y'all about the impact of being locked up in charges of adult, I was locked up at the age of 16 and was held for 18 months in an adult prison until my case was dismissed. My attorney came in to me, he said, look, you're gonna lose this case. They're offering you time served, you can get out today, 5 years probation. I think you can take, you should take the case. I mean, take the guilty plea. I didn't take the guilty plea. I had God on my side, so I waited out. They threw the case out that day. When I got out, there were so many barriers to me getting back on track. I couldn't go back to regular school because I was charged as an adult. I couldn't find a job because it still showed up on my record that I was charged as an adult. So every time I would go to try to get a job, they would deny me employment. And so young people have a lot of barriers that y'all don't even think about that happens when you incarcerate a young person. But also mentally, they're not getting what they need so that they can cope with this crazy world that we're all living in. You know what I'm saying? We have to come up with solutions that prevent people from doing wrong in the first place. So what is that? That's education. We should be spending as much as we're spending on incarcerating on educating. 2, young people have to be a part of the solution. They have to be the ones. If you want to know what they need, you got to ask them what they need. We don't need to magically guess what young people need. They know what they need back there. All these young people, I started this organization with other young people that are locked up and charged as adults 15 years ago. Look at this room now. All positive leaders. They know what they want. They know what they need. We don't have to guess what they need. They come to us, they tell us what they need. We help them connect to resources so they can have employment, jobs, and thrive in the future. We don't need jails. Jails have never worked. Let's look at the past history. None of this stuff has worked. And as long as y'all keep trying to come up with the solutions without the people that have the problem, y'all never come up with the real solutions. So we all need to change this narrative, like my brother said. We need to change this process. We need to prevent young people from committing crime in the first place. We need to make sure that we have robust, community-based solutions that help young people get what they need in their communities. They shouldn't have to go to a facility to get help. They should get help when they need help. Thank you.
I think that was spot on. And if I can take some time to advertise, our county council has approved me to post an RFP that currently talks a lot about the data that you just talked about. When you go back and watch our prior meetings in February, I presented out on a plan. And within that plan, I talked about a youth survey. I talked about 500 plus young people who have been in the system and sitting down, getting their perspective. That RFP is posted now. Hopefully we find a provider, we're able to contract them, and at that point, that's exactly what we're doing here. Again, that current RFP talks about alternatives, exclusive to detention. So, I do believe that the county hear you loud and clear, and I do appreciate your experience, but understand that these are all things that we are attempting to plan for. it isn't going to happen tomorrow. Just like you said, there isn't a magic wand, and young people are going to show up and understand what we're doing here. But again, these are things that we're trying to account for, and as we get that information, I promise you we're going to use it in order to inform our decisions.
Any other comments from the public? Yes, sure.
I just feel like, why?
Do you want to come to the?
Chairman, there's also one through our email, and I don't know traditionally if you read them out loud, but there was a public comment that came through email.
During COVID, we had them
Understood.
read, but yeah, you have to come here.
Understood. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Healthcare in prisons,
I'm sorry.
horrible.
Did you spoke previously?
Yeah, that's why I said.
Okay. Yeah. If you just keep it short, if you don't mind.
Healthcare, when incarcerated, that's a big explanation. And then, far as the fines after they get out of incarceration, I think that's a bit much. That's a big issue for you. There could be a 6-year-old that has to get a job and then pay that back. You know, parents nowadays, they're struggling to pay that back. So that's another issue. And to restate back to the whole school situation, if you're in prison and you do like 6 months in time, that's not enough credits. And their credit system is completely different from the school district system as well. So you got to think of that as well. Y'all don't offer the same amount of credits. So that's it. Mental health, the fines.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other new speakers? Keep it really brief. We don't usually. Okay.
Again, my name is Jared Cooper, and I just wanted to speak on alternatives. It's right here on my shirt. Youth Art Self-Empowerment Project. Self-Empowerment Project. We're empowering the youth around us. This organization is a prime example of what works. Send a youth who's been impacted by the criminal justice system to YASP. Watch them change. I wasn't the person I am today without YASP. So straight like that. Use the organizations that are already here, that are the Village of the Arts, Care Not Control, Youth Art Self-Empowerment Project, and more organizations that we can create. And we're nonprofit. If we're funded by the government, funded by people, by support around us, then look, we could do more things for the youth. We can create more, just more, but where's the funding at? We're doing this by ourselves. So that's all I got to say. Just put some respect on the organizations that are doing the work right now.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. So just the last comment I want to make is there were several people who spoke about having to be at the table, and decisions without members of the community being at the table aren't going to be the right decisions, and we agree. So that's why you're welcome to speak at every one of our meetings, but I'd also encourage you, whoever the right folks are to speak on behalf of the organization, please provide your contact info to Mr. Arizari. We'd like to make this an ongoing conversation as we move forward here. So whoever it is, please do so. Unless there are any other new public members who would like to speak. Oh, looks like we have one more.
Hi, my name is Heaven Chanel. 67 East Pastoria Street, Philadelphia, PA. I don't usually do this kind of thing, like speak at things like this, because I feel as though people don't listen. They just nod their head and act like they understand, because there's been multiple situations where I've been through stuff like that. I'm 20 years old, and even though I haven't been locked up, I'm one out of 14 siblings, so I have a lot of brothers. A lot of my brothers have been in and out the justice system. Hearing about certain things where people say, oh, I hear stories that kids go AWOL, kids cut their bracelets off, kids do this. I also hear stories about how COs and other staff in facilities sexually abuse their female, juveniles and stuff like that. Or I hear how certain staff inside facilities beat up certain youth. And that's not helping. Even when y'all stop these kids from doing what they're doing, such as stealing and stuff like that, y'all don't ask them if they have homes. Y'all don't ask them if they got love at home. Y'all don't ask them what's mentally wrong. I feel like evaluation and everything else like that should be taken care of before anybody gets locked up or anything else like that. Like, far as like when Jared said earlier that race plays into this, race definitely does play into this sometimes, because us Black Americans will get locked up for doing something, but white Americans can somehow always claim insanity or claim that they have a mental issue, and it's quick help for them. If we have a mental issue, we don't get help. We get straight sent to any juvenile facility, anything. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think this justice system is fair, period. I don't think nobody's getting no help with nothing, because what are the resources that we talking about? Is it getting them help with getting a home? Is it getting them help with getting clothes? Like, certain kids grow up in a bad environment. Like, when I was growing up, we didn't have food, water, nothing. My mom had to grind, my mom had to work hard for everything that we have. And when my mom passed, we didn't, like right now, I'm going through a loss right now. And my brothers is scattering everywhere to try to find anything that they can for my family. The justice system didn't do nothing for them. They went to jail and came back and still did the same thing. What change do y'all offer? Except sitting in a box all day, meeting people in there, having friends, planning to do the same thing when you get out, and what else? Y'all offer these resources, but are they really resources, and can y'all really help? Cause I don't be seeing it. Cause one of my brothers right now got out of jail, went back and did the same thing over and over again. Cause he said he has a mental issue. He's very bipolar and everything else like that. What did y'all offer? Thank you.
Thank you. Did you speak for yourself? No. Yeah, please go.
Hi, my name is Ami Glazer. My address is 4840 Walton Avenue, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 19143. My question is, you said earlier that this is like our seat at the table, our time to talk. So I'm just kind of curious what you're going to do differently after hearing all this. Like, are you going to do anything differently?
Well, again, I would say my overall strategy is to make sure young people are at the table. I'm going to make sure we're connected with this organization. Let's strategize on how we can move forward, right? In the interim, and as well as when we have a center and alternatives, how can this organization be a part of some decisions around young people? I'm committed to doing that.
In exactly what way?
We're going to start by meeting with your leadership, right? Understanding what you all need and where the intersections are, how we can help. And again, part of our RFP process is having 500, close to 600 young people, voices uplifted and giving us their opinion in terms of what they need and how we can be useful when we have that data. I'm able to bring that before council with an ask. If young people are saying, hey, we need more basketball programs, or whatever it is, we're going to use that data to inform our decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to acknowledge that there have been people here from the public that have shown up over time to talk about their time in the detention center and the resources that they did receive, mentorship that they did receive, and then they later gave back. I believe a gentleman has worked within the juvenile justice system for almost 20 years, 20 to 25 years, and he was a recipient of services received. And I think it takes, as I've heard a bunch of the village term, it takes all the voices to be at the table. And what we heard from you, Superintendent, when we had your interview was that that's exactly what you're committed to do, is a cross collaboration with all folks that deserve to have their voices at the table.
Thank you. Unless there are any other members of the public? Good, sir.
Hi, my name is Julian Andaya. My address is 5429 Sansom Street, Philadelphia, PA. So I wanted to address something that the board had mentioned. You had said that, like, we're not putting kids in cages, that, you know, they're giving care, like you said, but you also mentioned how, like, there is a need to not allow people to leave, and that in itself is imprisonment and taking away their right to freedom. I also wanted to ask the superintendent, you specifically stated that you were going to personally overview the COs and the supervision of this facility. I wanted to know, considering what you've heard about abuses against young people in these facilities and things like that, and the fact that there has been allegations and an investigation into this prior facility, what exact steps you're going to take in the future to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Yep. So again, it starts with changing the narrative, right? So nobody in our facility is a correctional officer, right? These are youth counselors, right? So we're going to start with that piece. We're going to make sure that anywhere from associates to a bachelor's degree, right? So we're going to raise the requirements a bit. We want to make sure we're paying folks well, right? Because that's a big piece, right? Understanding that a lot of times hurt people, right? So we got to make sure that we're allowing the folks in our facility to be paid a livable wage. So that's covered. In terms of our checks and balance system, we're going to have a grievance policy that, myself and our directors will personally oversee, making sure that we're taking account to any young person from the littlest to the biggest complaint. We want to make sure that we're hearing them and we're addressing it. And it comes down for me just leading by example, right? I hope to establish a culture there. I'm going to establish a culture there of child first. And at that point, we got to have a continuous system of improvement. So it is not going to be perfect. I am not perfect. But as things come up, I promise to address them and do my best to improve them in an expedient fashion.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
I want to thank those people who did come in and make their comments, but I want you to know also that this director has made a commitment and has gone to every juvenile facility that I know of in this area to look at what they are like, to look at the pros and the cons. Because he's not just saying, well, I'll do what we did in the past. He's made a very serious commitment. I was with him and his assistant director, and we spent 3 hours in Montgomery County Juvenile Detention Center looking at everything. Because he wanted to know what was going on, but before he went through the facility, he spent an hour and a half with the members of the staff asking, what did you do? Why did you do it? How did you do it? That's the kind of commitment this director has, and I support him.
Hello, my name is Hannah Spielberg. My address is 5819 Thomas Ave, Philadelphia, PA. I'm right on the border of Delaware County, and I'm here with this incredible group of young people that you got to hear speak today. I'm not going to be nearly as eloquent as any of them, but I do just want to touch on a few things. And first, I want to say I definitely can see Mr. Irizarry as a great ally to us, and I am really excited to talk with you more. And so I think what I want to address is that your leadership seems like it would be incredible in terms of changing the culture in a community setting. And that's, I think, as others have acknowledged, what we want to talk about, because again, I'm reiterating just in different ways what a lot of people have said. But prisons and jails, they haven't been here since the beginning of time. They were constructed after enslavement to lock up Black and brown people. And as Josh lifted up so beautifully, jails don't work. And so I've heard discussion about reimagination. So there is an opportunity to reimagine, not detention, but reimagine these alternatives, reimagine a replacement to what real safety looks like. I also want to acknowledge the piece about victims of crime. Every person that has spoken has been a victim of harm as well. And there's a brilliant person, Miriam Cabo, who says the first time that someone enters into harm or commits harm is not the first time that they have experienced it. So when we're talking about care, not control, we're talking about people who are victims themselves as well, and who are survivors of deep harm. And so yeah, I want to say, and also just that kind of taking, I know people have said there's been a lot of discussion about alternatives to detention, and I'm excited to hear about the RFP. So I want to think about what is it that needs to be done to make these viable options so that we are expanding beyond, because it seems like there's almost a moving forward with the detention facility without maybe necessarily acknowledging let's pursue these other things and try these other options first. And so those are just a few pieces I want to say. And in terms of the pieces of youth, for the protection of themselves, jail is the least safe person for a young person who is committing, who is engaging in self-harm. And especially because of, I can also speak to, I've worked with hundreds of young people, including many who experienced abuse at Glen Mills. Beautiful facility and campus, but as Ms. Dana said, the trauma is never going to be forgotten where some of these have taken place, and even when there's good staff, when there has been that culture. I think there's that culture in the whole idea of detention, and so I think bringing that culture outside of the box of detention is what we need to do. And I very much think and can see that you have those values, and so I'd love to think about how we can talk about all of those ways outside of a new facility that those types of opportunities can be possible for young people. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, Ms. Townsend?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to first thank everyone for their comments and their perspectives and underscore that part of the reason why this board exists is because prior to this, there was not this level of oversight. And you do have allies and champions around the table who have committed our time and our expertise to move this work forward. And what I would offer is that, Superintendent Irizarry is aligned. I have not heard anything other than maybe a few inaccuracies that we all agree with you on. We believe in alternatives first. We believe in making sure that the facilities that are available when needed have to be safe. We believe in the culture of care for young people. We believe in professionalizing the staff there and supporting them. And so I just want to underscore that there are many aspects that we agree with. We had no control over the past. We were not a board then, but we do have control over the future that we're taking, and we want to do that with you. And there'll be opportunities for data collection and information, and I hope you will be a champion and accept that invitation so that your voice and the voice of your comrades and colleagues and the young people are represented, because that's what Mr. Irizarry is doing. He's making data-driven decisions, and he's making decisions that are informed by community members, and you can help amplify that by making sure that the word is out and being a strong partner. And so I hope you are feeling the receptive nature of this board and accept our invitation to continue the dialogue.
Yeah, and I'll also add, we have engaged with national thought leaders on alternatives to traditional juvenile detention. We're talking about the Youth Advocacy Partnership, Columbia Youth Center. So, we're listening to folks who are aligned with the concerns that you've had. I know it's just words, and I hope you'll hold us accountable, but this is something that we're all deeply committed to. And just as Ms. Fulmer Townsend said, we have a lot of folks on the board who that is their background, is substantially reforming what juvenile, not detention necessarily, but overall kind of, working with youth looks like.
Just to reiterate, sure. Let me quick comment. So just to reiterate what Councilman Madden said, right? So it wasn't a one and done. Councilman Madden and myself, we meet with Columbia's Justice Lab on a bi-weekly basis, and this has happened since I was hired in January. We continue to consult with them around alternatives, best practices, and that's something we're committed and to continue to do, and all other thought partners in this process. So I look forward to working with you all as well.
My name is Avante Mitchell, and honestly, what my coworkers is trying to tell y'all is we've been waiting for the change so long, and we crave for it now. It's to the points, everybody who came up here literally told y'all we had our experience, like trauma, like rape, anything, like it all been in the past. But I could tell you myself, from a victim of this situation, like I changed my whole way of thinking on the strength of them. The only reason why, because the life that I was living, it was only going to send me one way, being dead or in jail. I lost a lot of friends over the year, and to be honest with you, I only got like a good 2 left, and it hurts to say, but I grew up with a lot of good friends and close, like was very close to me. And honestly, it's like we need a change. Like for us, we could have our people would go down there and start speaking to the children. You feel me? Let them know that we've been in a situation. I've been back and forth as youth, like back in jail. Like I'm be honest with you, like it drove my mom crazy to the point like I watch her cry in my face and ask and beg for change. Until I realized as a man, a young man, that only one person gonna give you that change, and it's yourself. You gotta look in the mirror and stare at yourself like, do I want this for my life? Do I want this? Do I want that change? And stare back and really get the answer. Some people don't understand that, but I realized it as a young man, and I'm doing better as a now. Like, I help my family, even though we have our ups and downs, but I'm still here, you feel me? And I just want y'all to understand, I'm not trying to tell y'all like to do this, do that, do that. I just want to see those baby steps. I want to see us crawl there and finally get to victory. Like, you feel me? That's all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments from the public? All right.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabby Jackson. I live in Philadelphia, PA. I'm the Organizer Advocacy Director at Youth Art Self-Empowerment Project. I sat back and I, heard what everyone was saying and also like the powerful speakers that did come up. I have a few questions, but then also I have a few comments and being very transparent and also giving trigger warnings. I heard you say earlier that, I heard the detention centers created to create public safety. 2, I also heard also you have youth out here that might have sexually assaulted, you have a 17 youth out here that sexually assaulted a 3-year-old. As a survivor of sexual assault, healing doesn't happen just because somebody goes to prison. You get what I'm saying? So, and also I feel like one question that comes up for me is what is the goal? So we're opening a detention center where we're sending these youth that obviously might be doing, creating harm within the community. But you're sending them into these detention centers when also a previous detention center that was closed, healing hasn't came forth from that. And so our next move is like, okay, let's go create this new detention center because we need to place these youth in the 4 walls because they're doing these traumatic harms. But what about the traumatic harms that these other folks have done? Who's holding them accountable? Are there places where we're holding those people accountable? And for the youth that are out here doing or causing harm, the alternatives piece. Yes, detention centers are it could be an alternative, but I don't believe in it wholeheartedly because it creates more harm than accountability or building accountability or creating healing. So my question is, what is the goal for this detention center? What actually do you guys hope to get out of this? Because it's not creating any positivity in a sense, but as in providing public safety, which is really not, it's still causing more harm for youth that are coming into this facility, these new facilities. What are your goals for this? And what are your alternatives? Like I heard the ROP, but what are alternatives? And what is the process actually before going into these detention centers? Those are my questions. So.
In terms of, can you all hear me? In terms of some alternatives, I mean, again, County Council has approved us accepting a grant with the Youth Advocacy Program, which essentially is a credible messenger model, right? You're hiring people from the community to be a mentor, to be a confidant, to be one-on-ones with young people as an alternative to detention, right? We're going to utilize projects very similar for young people who don't need the intervention of detention. In terms of our goal, again, we talked about collectively making sure it's a dual-purpose facility, right? So as we looked at the data and we looked at the average length of stay here in Delaware County being around 16 days, now that may change with a young person who's charged with a very serious crime and waiting trial. Collectively, our design committee thought the more time we have with young people and the more substantial time addressing their out-of-school time, their idle time, which can also be known as the devil's time, right? If we can address that, the likelihood that they would need a new facility would decrease drastically, right? So we went out to Lancaster, we looked at their center, they had even reporting center model, right? Which essentially in Philly is like a rec center, right? If we can have structured programming in an open place, they aren't chained up, they aren't locked up, they go home at the end of the night, something of that nature. And again, our design committee is working on what a final project would look like. But we want to address, whether it's a short amount of time or 6 months with young people, we want to make sure that we're servicing them so when they do re-enter in society, they have some of the tools they need to be successful. We know we have to connect them job training. We know we have to connect them, we have to help the family as well. Mom may need a job. We're thinking holistically. We're not there yet, but that's kind of our overarching kind of pie in the sky kind of thought.
I'm sorry, double dip, but.
If you make it really quick. But typically, folks have 3 minutes total.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't get my whole 3 minutes anyway. Okay. So how y'all doing? My name is Josh Glenn. And the one thing I just wanted to say is that, you can't really lead the people if you don't feed the people. You know what I'm saying? So we have these programs, and, you get a young person in this facility, they locked up for a certain amount of time, but they're not set up for success upon their release, right? And they're not set up to thrive. And so they go back into the same environments where, they were struggling in the first place, to the same situations, which causes them to make the same mistakes. And so we have to really make sure, like I said, community-based, resources, community-based solutions. We need to be able to service young people in their communities. The other thing I wanted to say was, a lot of times, when we come to these type of board meetings, we don't have real power to what's going to happen. Like y'all, we come here, y'all listen to us, y'all hear all of our stories, you hear about what we think solutions are, but y'all make all the decisions. And so if y'all want us to participate in this process, we have to have control at some level on what's going to happen. Like we have to have an equal vote. And we need care, not control.
Okay, any other members of the public?
I spoke earlier. My name is Kirsten Fitzsimmons. I am a member of the Delaware County's Juvenile Probation Department, but I want to speak a little bit not just in a department manner, but also in a public comment as well. I have worked in a lot of different areas in the criminal justice world, as well as placement, detention in the probation department in and of themselves. And I know a lot of people are wondering about what alternatives we do use in the probation department. And I would like to say that of the number of youth who are detained, it is a very, very, very limited number of the amount of youth served in general by the department. I cannot answer for police departments. I cannot answer for, the district attorneys who file charges. We are here after the fact, and I can say that generally almost everybody in this department who we work with cares. They care so much about the kids that they are trying to serve. The system in and of itself is definitely broken, and there's a lack of resources in the community. I wholeheartedly appreciate the resources you guys are bringing to the table, and I wish that there were more of them in our community that maybe we do have contracts with or who are open to working with some of our youth. But some of the alternatives that we do use before even getting to detention are mentor-based models that we work with. They have youth advocates that they work with. But most of the kids who come through the probation department in and of themselves don't even need that. Most of the time they get through probation, they get through their conditions, and they move through the system, and they don't. But the ones who do end up in our detention centers are very complex cases. There may be horrible family circumstances. There may be nowhere for them to go, which doesn't necessarily mean that they should be in detention, but there's also victims out there as well. So we are trying to look at it from all angles, and I would say that generally over the years, even from when I started, that our detention numbers have significantly gone down. There has been a push for initiatives for alternatives, and we're currently using a new Padre model tool that we use when we get a call from the police department saying, hey, we have this youth here and they committed X, Y, and Z crime or alleged to have committed a crime. And unless they score for detention, we're doing an alternative. And the only reason a new youth who's not known to us would score for detention if it's a most serious crime, a felony 1 offense. That would be the only reason they would be scored for detention. Any other than that, it's an alternative, which could be a GPS monitor, and they return home to their families. And we would also implement a community-based program with them. And I will say that I'm going to share a little bit about my experience. I'm married to a young man who also spent time in the detention center as a youth. I can't say that he necessarily speaks highly of his time, but that times have changed since he was young, and I'm sure that some of you young ladies and gentlemen have been there as well. I will wrap it up. He spent time there as well, so I do try and look at it from all angles, and I would certainly say that the probation department hears you, and I think that this board hears you, and we're all trying to do our best in a very limited resource world when it comes to staffing and long waiting lists for mental health, and just trying to get some of our youth the resources that they do need. So that's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Unless there's any other public comment, we will go to board member comments. Anything more from the board? Hearing none, I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you.